Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to our presentation. We have chosen to speak about disinformation online for our group project. Our group members are Kyle, my name is Paula, and also Mason and William. And we'll begin with a short introduction about what misinformation is.
Fake news, alternative facts, and biased information. These are all terms that people all over the world have become increasingly more familiar with as a result of the past US election cycles that have been heavily monitored and watched by people all over the world for the past 4 years, starting in 2016. The rise in disinformation campaigns has spread like a wildfire within the past 4 years as a result of these elections, but these issues have existed long before that. In modern times, these sorts of disinformation campaigns have existed predominantly in the sphere of the internet, where people on various social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat have been given the tools to lie to unsuspecting viewers and provide groundless claims in the hopes of misleading others towards a cause or belief that has no recognizable fact or factual base. The largest scandal recently from a social media platform has been the multiple news sources that have released various videos and articles regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. These videos and articles have created a mountain of controversy and sizable pools of doubt that have caused unsuspecting citizens, particularly citizens living in the US, to not heed the warnings of countless government officials and countless scientists who have researched these topics. An example of this could be Anthony Fauci. He is the director of the CDC, and his claims have been, time after time, have been rejected or just downright neglected by the mass public. One video in particular that was also disputed and dismantled by Anthony Fauci that did quite a bit of damage was a documentary-style video called Plandemic. This documentary was heavily featured and advertised on Facebook, where it received millions and millions of views before it was eventually flagged by teams at Facebook and taken down for perpetuating dishonest claims. While it's a good thing that this video was taken down from most social media platforms, the information it served has already been consumed by a rather large group of people. The unfortunate thing about this is that these are not isolated incidents. Cases like this happen every day across an almost uncountable amount of websites where people are basically unchecked on what they say and post. Only after these sorts of campaigns gain some form of traction do they eventually get shut down. But by that time, the majority of the damage has already been done, and they've already influenced quite a large population of people. Instances like this have created an unstable news environment where it is difficult to trust any one particular source at face value without doing your own research on a particular topic. Sources that come to mind when I think about that have had a lot of issues with honesty in the past could be things like Breitbart, things like Fox News, even CNN has had its own run-ins with issues for credibility. It is in these sorts of environments where disinformation thrives because the majority of people either don't have the interest to look into and read into their sources, or they're simply too busy to read into an information bit like a headline or a tagline for a story. These types of sources are incredibly damaging to the fabric of society, as it can create a system in which it's impossible to place your trust in information sources, as they could be blatantly lying to your face. Aside from COVID-19 issues, though, other things related to disinformation, especially in the US, could be related to politics in the US. Unfortunately, in the last 4 years, the President of the United States has found himself in multiple situations where he has made groundless claims and told blatant lies to the public when there have been multiple sources of information to refute his claims. This has become more or less the norm in the sense of information disbursement from the White House executives, where they support groundless claims and refute well-researched and agreed-upon topics with their own opinions and their own thoughts and ideas. While it may appear topical that these sorts of actions do have the potential to influence quite a few people because it can train the average viewer or the average listener or the average citizen that this type of dialogue and that this manner of trying to convey information should be accepted as a part of political discourse when it absolutely shouldn't be. Regardless of whichever sphere it may be in, disinformation and the many forms it may take are very dangerous to our society, as it has the potential to shape the controversial landscape for long periods of time, and if left unchecked, it can have catastrophic effects on everyday people. Uh, in this presentation, we will address some of the examples that show the damage that and the nature of disinformation campaigns can cause in order to shed light on the topic to make our peers aware of the danger that exists.
And for our first example, I'm going to speak about the human cost of misinformation, and especially with how it is related to the current COVID or coronavirus pandemic that is going on, not only in our country right now, but around the world. So COVID has been riddled with fake news, whether it is about potential cures or super spreaders. This is happening all over the world. This is being spread from doctors all the way to President Donald Trump, who is very associated with fake news, as you will learn later on in this presentation. So one of the first things that I want to go into is hydrochloroquine and how it is being falsely spread on the internet through various mediums such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, blogs, and articles as a potential cure for COVID. And in turn, this has had a really negative impact on a lot of people's lives. And within an article that I analyzed, they talk about how a family was reading the news, or not reading the news, they were looking on Twitter and they noticed that the President Donald Trump wrote how hydrochloroquine was a potential cure for COVID. And in turn, they went and took some of that medication. It ended up making them much more sick than they were. They had to go to the hospital, and it made it so they actually weren't able to get cured, and someone actually passed away, sadly, because of that. And it just really shows how this all started from people spreading things to either gain likes or to gain views. And in turn, it actually has a real human, real world consequence. And in this case, it proved to be fatal. And for others, it wasn't fatal, but it did prove to be dangerous. Another consequence of fake news within COVID is alcohol poisoning. And I know that sounds a little obscure and bizarre, but in certain parts of the world, people were spreading news that consuming alcohol and an abundance of it would in turn make it so you were going to be cured from COVID. And this actually got taken so far to the point where a young child actually ended up becoming blind. He was a 5-year-old boy, and his parents basically gave him an abundance of illegal alcohol in an attempt to fight the disease. And now he can't see, and it just truly shows the real world consequence of something like following some of these fake news outlets. We also have cases of phone masts being vandalized. A lot of people believe that 5G is one of the reasons of COVID being spread. And there are actually numerous stories associated with this, which are showing how susceptible people are to some of these fake news outlets and personalities on social media. So a quote from a man by the name of Brian Lee Hitchens says, "We thought the government was using it to distract us, or it was to do with 5G, so we didn't follow the rules or seek help sooner." In this case, Brian and his wife are actually now talking by phone in this interview from a hospital bed as they lay in their beds, his wife on a ventilator. So it shows, again, the real world consequences of the spread of fake news. And it shows that it's not just coming from certain people on social media, it's coming from outlets, it's coming from famous and well-respected individuals like the president, and from doctors from all around the world who are spreading fake news or their own opinion, whether it is factual or not. And in turn, there's actually been phone masts, which are basically like the telephone poles and stuff that lays out the connection, that have been getting vandalized all around certain countries because people believe that 5G is a true spreader of this. There are a ton of cases of arson, assaults, and conspiracies involving who is spreading COVID. A lot of people in Asian countries had to face a lot of backlash as at first, even Donald Trump is spreading that it's the China virus. And it's has a huge negative impact on a lot of Asian people as it's creating a false negative stereotype. And it's really showing that this is affecting people's lives, and not just in the sense of making it so they might not get healthier from the virus quicker, but it's also making it so people are getting accused of things. There was at one point a bunch of Muslims were getting accused of spreading the virus when that is not the case. Anyone can spread it. And you're going to learn a little more in the next slide about Donald Trump and his fake news. Thank you.
Great. So our second example of misinformation and disinformation is centered around Donald Trump. As Mason mentioned, disinformation is affecting the health, the well-being, and everyday lives of citizens throughout America, but also throughout the world. People have been affected in all different facets of misinformation, and doctors and COVID and health issues has been one alleyway in which it's happening. Another one is the political sphere and Donald Trump. Donald Trump is disinforming his citizens in a bunch of different facets. As Mason mentioned, he has spread a lot of misinformation about the coronavirus itself. He has said when vaccines are going to come out, which haven't been true. He has said certain numbers of deaths which haven't been true. It's really important that, unfortunately, with everything that Donald Trump says, we have to take that with a grain of salt and understand that with new technology and with new media, this could be misinformation. It has a great possibility of being misinformation, and that's what we've learned through Donald Trump. And so what I'm gonna, highlight and what I'm gonna speak mostly about is voter fraud and how he uses misinformation and disinformation to selfishly try to gain success himself while disinforming the people of America as our leader, which is not a credible characteristic of a president, to say the least. So let's get into it. Disinformation has presented a major issue with the rise of immediate media. And because of this, credibility and rhetoric has lost importance as even major leaders fuel the fire of disinformation. So I think this is so important because if we talk about credibility in speakers, one of the things I envy about Barack Obama is I think as a leader, he has great credibility. Like, he's got great character. You trust the words he say, he's probably being selfless. I say Donald Trump is the exact opposite of this. And part of this is because most of the things he's saying just isn't true, which then trickles down from federal to state to regional levels of people all across the world and all across the country who feel that it is now okay to disinform and misinform because a major leader like Donald Trump is doing so. Donald Trump is well known for spreading disinformation during his time as the president of America and also while he was on the way out. The article, Georgia Voting Manager, says he now has police protection to guard against threats caused by Trump's election of disinformation, points to some of the real life consequences that the rhetoric of Donald Trump can have on citizens of America. According to the article, Trump is quoted saying, we won Georgia, just so you understand, using a false statement to rile the crowd. And that's from Dizenova. And Trump is also quoted saying, we're fighting very hard for this state when you look at all the corruption and all the problems that have to do with this election. And that's from the same article. So these are two quotes at a rally of his that are just completely wrong. They went to court, they went to federal court as a lawsuit, and they came back completely fact-checked and completely wrong. And so this really, again, just makes you question the moral ethics of Donald Trump. What is he going for? What is he fighting for? And it's just a major example of disinformation of a powerful leader, of a powerful world leader that then, as Mason pointed out, has effects on the everyday lives of average people, everyday people. As the article that I made an example of points out, his statements, which turned out to be completely false, are now still affecting the lives of others, of everyday people. You know, like the article says, like it says right in the title, voting manager says he now has police protection to guard against threats caused by Trump's election. So he now has death threats to his well-being because of a out of the park, disinformed statement that the once president of the United States made. You know, so it's just important to understand the power that we have in our rhetoric. You know, our rhetoric is a tool, but it also can be, it's a double-edged sword. It can be used in a very negative way, as we learned throughout so many instances in this class. And so Donald Trump is a major example of disinformation, and we will conclude on the next slide.
All right, so after we saw the details of the spread of misinformation online and learning about real life examples, it's very clear that it has become a big problem. Any person, even if they may think they're able to detect fake news, is susceptible to falling into becoming a victim of misleading or simply false information on the internet. As we learned, disinformation could be easily spread by relevant public figures or people with large followings on the internet, which makes it so much more dangerous. It's evident that this information has the potential to cause real life consequences that can be detrimental to a certain group, a certain public health issue, or the future of a country's government. Thankfully, not everything is lost. Currently, there are people and organizations that are trying their best to stop the spread of this information, debunk false claims, fact-check statements, and deny access of malicious bots that may attempt to spread false information for vulnerable publics. A good tool to block out any false advertisements showing up on regular websites is an ad blocker, such as AdBlock. It prevents the spread of misleading information by simply not showing it on websites. There are also many websites that focus on debunking myths and conducting fact checks, such as Snopes. Snopes explains and debunks many stories that arise on the internet and allows users to notice if the information they have read is true, misleading, or if it's simply false. They fact check everything, even if it's an innocent story about getting free fast food or something that the president may have said. And also with the case of COVID-19 in particular, as we learned from the things that Mason mentioned, the World Health Organization has dedicated an entire section of their website. They titled it Mythbusters, and in there they have compiled misinformation about COVID and the truth about and facts behind it. They even have helpful links to help people report misinformation on different platforms when they see it. Now, when it comes to misinformation being regulated on social media platforms, it becomes a very complicated issue. Social media platforms have tried their best to abide by the freedom of speech principles, but the increase of disinformation coming from all over the world has caused them to start putting in certain filters and disclaimers to attempt to control the issue. Facebook and Twitter experienced a backlash from the 2016 elections and how their platforms allow for deceptive posts and advertising to be freely spread. After landing themselves on questioning by the US Congress, they have worked on stopping the spread of misinformation more strongly. Although the platforms still present issues, they come with misinformation policies on their websites that specifically point out to what they consider to be misleading and what actions will be taken to remove that information. Recently, with the pandemic and the elections, as we learned, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram have faced tougher challenges that have left them with the need to implement disclaimers and fact-checking tools on user-generated content talking about these topics. So if any person were to tweet something, including the words COVID, and Twitter flags it as possible misinformation, their tweet will then appear with a small disclaimer at the bottom, with a link leading to facts about COVID-19. The same disclaimer appears on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and even Google when simply using the word COVID or coronavirus. As for the election, these platforms also had to use similar disclaimers and information that was not 100% verified. As we learned, even President Trump's tweets had disclaimers on them. Some tweets were hidden and could only be seen by clicking and seeing links to verifiable information. After the election, Twitter said that they labeled, as of November 12, 2020, 300,000 tweets containing disputed and potentially misleading information about the election. This is from NPR. I have personally seen from my own experiences how misinformation can be damaging, especially to older populations. Everyone can be susceptible to fake news, but I can safely say that older populations that did not grow up around the internet are the ones that are mostly at risk. There is a lesson experience with the internet as a whole, which leads to a lack of fact-checking practices, and it makes it more likely for misinformation to be easily believed and processed as a fact, no matter where the sources are coming from. Perhaps this is not as common in the US, but in other countries, there's WhatsApp, which is a messaging app owned by Facebook. And it's private messages, but people spread enormous amounts of misinformation in there. And it's so hard to regulate because it's people's private messages, so there's really not a certain way to do it without violating privacy. My family uses it. My family's not from the US. And I've seen how they easily fall into getting scared by a random chain message that they get, or even trying unverified COVID-19 cures or prevention methods just because someone sent them a video or a chain message or something on WhatsApp. And I know that this happens in other countries too, all over the world. So I think it would be really important for WhatsApp to implement some kind of fact-checking feature or regulative tool that may be helpful in diminishing the amount of misinformation. So we have learned how dangerous misinformation can be for everyone, no matter who you are, and that it can be spread by anyone, no matter who those people are. So we urge everyone to always be careful as to what kind of information they read online, to always fact check and to always check the sources, because that would be the best way to stop the spread of disinformation, and to always be critical whenever reading something online. So we thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you.